Important complaints regulations moved a step closer in LegCo last week, but was there really a need to break convention and rush things through? The Health Minister certainly thought so. And following government's decision to extend Kroger's licence, how could we miss the opportunity for another should we, shouldn't we debate on gas extraction? I began by pointing out to Minister Hooper that he had a record for challenging rushing legislation through. So what's changed?
So my position on the flexibility of Parliament has always been the same, actually, that if a minister is bringing something forward, it's their job to make a case. You know, when you bring something forward and say, look, I need to do this quickly for whatever reason, convince me. It's the minister's job to convince backbenchers to say yes or no to that proposal, because ultimately it's the House's decision how quickly things move or how slowly things move. And sometimes I supported that when I was convinced by the minister making their case. Sometimes I didn't, when the minister didn't adequately convince me that they needed to do things quickly or to change the way they were processing something through Parliament. And that's exactly what we did on Tuesday. We were advised quite late into the development of our complaints regulations, which I think you would agree are absolutely critical to getting our health service functioning better, having a proper modern complaints process. Tynwald told us to do it, so we're trying to do it as quickly as Tynwald have instructed, and a bit of a roadblock quite recently, very, very late into the process, that said actually we needed some more legal powers than we currently have, so basically it's just a regulation-making power. And in order to get that done, we needed to take it through the House very quickly and take it through the Legislative Council very quickly. So on Tuesday, I made that request. I explained the process. I explained to members why we were where we are, why it was important that we get this done quickly, and asked them if we could take it through in a much quicker format. I didn't convince everyone. I think 3 members weren't convinced. Absolutely their right to vote whichever way they want. But the House ultimately thought, yes, I've made a convincing enough argument to take that small 2-clause bill through in a single sitting. And to my mind, that's the right approach. We talked earlier in another interview about bureaucracy stymieing progress, and sometimes process is important, and there needs to be good reason to step outside of it. I don't disagree with any of that, but ultimately you shouldn't be constrained by a process. You shouldn't say, I can't do this, if there is actually a way of making it happen. I think it's our job as politicians to make things happen, actually, to implement the will of the electorate. And in this case, the will of the electorate is quite clear. The complaints process inside our health and care service is not fit for purpose. It needs to be improved. That view has come through from constituents time and time again. It's come through from other ministers. It's come through from members of Tynwald. It's come through in my emails whilst we've been sitting here talking, another person complaining about the complaint system. So it needs fixing.
And I mean, this is not a new problem, though, is it? I mean, this is something that Tynwald has been. I think the previous Tynwald, before the election, asked the department to crack on with.
Yes.
So how has it taken so long for somebody to work out that you didn't have the power to do it?
So partly it comes down to the scope of what needs to be done. So the original plan, as far as I remember, was to bring a bill through that dealt with complaints. Tynwald back in April 2021, actually said do it by regulation, bring these regulations forward as quickly as possible, and that I think posed a slight challenge for the previous department members and minister, because they thought it was going to be a lot simpler than it was, and when they started looking into it and the work was being done, it turns out this isn't going to be a simple set of regulations. It's going to be 8 sets of regulations that are needed to do this under the current legal framework, and that complexity I think is what caused it to be delayed. After the election, obviously that was another delay in the process. The new minister, myself and my team, we wanted to have another look at this process, because we were concerned that actually were we doing the right thing, and the answer is yes. I think this is still the right approach, but the one thing we decided to do was try and make the independent health and care ombudsman look and feel as close to a truly independent ombudsman as possible, because what we don't want to do is in 2 years, when we bring our NHS reform bill through, we don't want to go through this whole process again. We want to get something right now and then make it as right as possible, so that when we eventually put it into primary law, we don't have to make too many changes. So as far as the public and clinicians and everyone is concerned, what we are going to end up with now is, for all intents and purposes, the final looking solution to the problem, and that caused a little bit of a knock-on delay. But I think it was possibly that decision that said let's go as far as we can that maybe has caused us to say, well, we can't actually do everything we need to do. And if you want specifics, it was the specific work that needs to be done under the Children and Young Persons Act and the Social Services Act. So the healthcare stuff we could probably have done already, but it was the social services side of the complaints function that was going to cause us issues. And I think that to my mind, is equally as important as the healthcare side. And so we didn't want to go and say, well, we'll just do the health stuff and we'll leave the social services complaints for another day. And the solution to that was obviously to bring a very, very short amending bill through the House of Keys very quickly.
And I suppose for those who don't know the process, you have first reading, then the week after first reading you have second reading. There tends then to be a delay of a fortnight for clauses, and then the week after clauses you get third reading. So that's not a long process. It's about within a couple of months you can get through one of the branches, but then of course it goes to the next branch up to LegCo. And effectively there aren't enough sittings to get all that done before the summer, so you'd be back in October into LegCo. Potentially it would be Christmas before you would get royal assent, because not only do you have to pass the bill through both branches, you then have to wait for royal assent to be given before anything can be done with the bill. So it could have been round about this time next year before you would have got the regulations in place, which is why you felt the need to
absolutely. I mean, the other alternative would have been to shorten some parts of the process, so we could have taken it through over a number of weeks rather than trying to do it in a single sitting. The problem with that is we are trying to get these regulations, because it's actually a complex, it's a two-stage process. So the first stage of regulations we have to make basically let us make the second set of regulations. So we have to have a 2-month period. And so some of the regulations we're hoping to bring forward either June or July, and then the rest, the sitting afterwards. And it's that timescale that causes us an issue, that if we'd have even gone through a couple of weeks of a process in each branch, we'd have ended up pushing us probably definitely the other side of the summer, and possibly even closer to Christmas, because there's also the 6-week Register of Business deadline that Tynwald has implemented, so that adds an extra time scale on. So really it's the knock-on effect of everything, the time of year and the extra weeks that we need, would cause this to kick in later than it otherwise would have done. And sometimes that's okay, I think. If there's no particular rush to get something in, there's no problem delaying things by a few months. But I think this was, like I say, it was the start of 2021 that really Tynwald said, get this done. I can't see any reason really to delay that, when really all we needed was, it's just a technical bill. It doesn't do anything in and of itself. The important things will be the regulations that we're now going to make underneath that bill, and the intention, like I told the House of Keys on Tuesday, is to publish those as soon as they are fit for purpose. As soon as they're ready, I'll be publishing them, even if I can't legally make them yet. And I want them out there because I want those to have as much scrutiny, as much time for public scrutiny as possible, because they are the key piece of this puzzle. The bill that came through on Tuesday was very much about, let's give us the power to do the thing we need to do. If it was doing anything more than that, I think I would have been quite nervous coming and asking the House of Keys for permission to take it through quickly, because like you've already said, I'm not a big fan of rushing things for no reason, even if I think that is an approach that has been taken in the past. But because this bill, because of the nature of it, because of the size of it, it felt to me the right thing to do was to ask permission to do that quickly, rather than try and delay things at all.
That was Laurie Hooper, MHK. With Crogga being granted an extension to their licence to explore our territorial seas for gas, I persuaded Stu Peters, MHK, and Paul Crane, MLC, to consider the implications of government's decision.
To me, Phil, it's a no-brainer, this. We've been told that there is gas in Crogga, in the Crogga field. I don't know. I'm not a geologist, so I don't know whether there's gas there or not. But the people who are prepared to put their money into this to find out say that there is. And to me, it would be criminal not to exploit our natural resources and reserves, especially given the fact that we've got no energy security at the moment. We're at the end of a pipeline, and anybody could turn the taps off at any time that they wanted to. Gas is unaffordable, and the Crogga people say that, if they do find the reserves that they expect, they'll sell it to the Isle of Man government cheap. It's a win-win for me.
Paul, why isn't it a good idea?
If this was 1997, 25 years back, and the Isle of Man was looking to move out of oil for its electricity generation and build a new gas power station, which of course opened in 2004, if this was at that stage, I would absolutely support a scheme that would be looking for gas in Manx territorial waters. It would have powered the new power station for the next 20 years, maybe, if it's there in that sort of quantity. But it's not 1997, it's 2022. And the gas power station we built in 2004, which then involved transitional fuel as we moved from the dirtier oil to the cleaner gas, the transition that we made has now run nearly 20 years, and the power station's maybe got about 10 years left of life to run. So we're coming to the end of the period where we've relied on gas. The world has moved on. We've got an enormous understanding now of what's happening to the atmosphere. And of course, it's not just the atmosphere. We're living very unsustainably. We've got damage in terms of plastics in the oceans. We've got damage in terms of biodiversity loss, and in terms of the rate of extinction at the moment higher than it's been for millions of years. And then we've got the temperature rising, and we've got very, very clear monitoring of that. If someone says it's not scientifically so, they're scientifically illiterate, because the scale, the amount of science that's gone on, and the levels of confidence limits that are there, it is very, very clear that not just that the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is rising, it's causing the temperatures to rise. And we've got at the moment an attempt globally to try and halt that at 1.5 degrees, even rising beyond that to 2 degrees, which is very possibility. It's a clear possibility that could come about. At 2 degrees, we lose the world's corals and a whole series of changes going on. So we've got a very short time to address this. And we've been functioning now, COP26 was the 26th global conference on this. We've got to get emissions down. So it's not great. Giving permission for them to carry on and look seismic tests to see if it's there, that's not the worst thing in the world. The worst thing will be if we end up burning the gas for another 20 years here. So I'm not wildly upset about it, but it's not a good idea. It's not a good way forward.
So, Stu, you're scientifically illiterate, it would appear.
Well, yeah, but I am scientifically illiterate. I'm the first person to admit that. I'm not a scientist. Anything that's got footnotes and things is far beyond my ken to understand. But it's just that, and I've got a huge amount of respect for yourself and for Paul and for Rob Mercer and for Daphne and their point of view about this. But even if I was the greenest person in the world, I would still have to say that anything that we do on the Isle of Man is going to have zero effect on all the problems that Paul is talking about. So, the coral reefs aren't going to bleach anymore. There's going to be no more extinction because of the fact that we're using local gas rather than gas that comes from Russia or Poland or Norway or wherever. We're still using gas. It's just that it's local gas. And it's going to be of benefit to the Manx people. And they're the people that voted me in. I'm not worried what people think internationally. I don't believe that taking our own gas out of the ground is going to affect our reputation, as some people seem to suggest. That's all a nonsense. What we've got is a real problem here at the moment. We've got pensioners, people on low incomes that can't afford to turn the heating on this winter because the gas prices have gone through the roof. If there is gas at Crogga, and it's a big if, then they've offered to sell it to us cheap, and it's going to get rid of that problem. It's not going to be tomorrow. It's obviously going to take a time to do it, but the sooner that we get down to it, the better. And to me, that includes removing any restrictions on when they can survey. At the moment, they can only survey in the winter months. It's a nonsense. Get the boats out tomorrow, see whether or not there's gas there, and if there is, let's get it out.
And what's the reason for those restrictions? Are you aware of those?
I think it's something to do with sea life or fishing grounds or something like that, but I'm not entirely sure about it. It's just yet another obstacle that has been put in the way of this exploration by officers and people within the DOI and other departments, as far as I can see.
Are we ever going to get to the end of this particular matter? I mean, hasn't this just been a rather convenient decision for Council of Ministers to make? Realistically, we're talking at least another 6 years, possibly even longer, before any gas is going to appear. Comin are probably thinking the last thing we need is more trouble, so we'll just we'll just give them their extension. It would appear that this is a great long grass solution for council of ministers. It all gently goes away, and nothing happens. The appearance of action.
Paul and I both went to the PAG meeting where the Kroger people, and Paul was on the other side of the debate on this, on the stage, and they say that it's not going to take that long. That it's going to take a period of time for them to set up all the surveys, to raise the cash, to do the job. Let's hope that all that goes swimmingly. But the once they've actually drilled into the ground, if they find that there is what they expect to find there with the seismic surveys, they can drill into the ground with a test well. If that starts to produce gas, then it's job on, boys, because that is effectively the first borehole that is producing gas. And they'll add others later. So, everybody's very keen to say, oh yeah, but that's not going to solve the problem today. No, it's not. But at some point, we need to grasp this, and, we've got a potential gold mine in our backyard, and for some crazy reason, we're not using it.
And Paul, I mean, realistically, Stuart does have a point of sorts here. We have got this resource. Isle of Man government is in real financial difficulties at the moment. We're talking about introducing the dreaded stealth charges, stealth taxes, as a way to overcome the shortfalls in the budget. The Treasury Minister said that in his April. Well, he didn't call them stealth taxes, obviously, but effectively introducing new charges, which are only going to affect people who can afford them, which, again, that limits what charges might be available. But Isle of Man government is really strapped for cash. This, if it ever comes to fruition, this is a great opportunity to fund all the things that you and I are passionate for, things like get better insulation on the homes, less energy draining machines, basically moving our island towards a low carbon future, in which future we wouldn't be dependent on external fossil fuels. Surely this is the answer.
There's so many red herrings in the discussions that have gone on between you and Stuart. Let me try and sort of pick up a few of those. What the Isle of Man do make a difference? We are just a drop in the ocean, but the reality is the ocean's made up entirely of drops, so we can't sort of excuse ourselves from this. The cleanest and cheapest form of producing electricity at the moment is wind. The Isle of Man, you mentioned the resources we've got. We don't know if we've got gas resources. We do know that we've got one of the best wind regimes in Europe. So we can cut our energy bills by moving towards use of renewables, and we don't have to wait 6 years for that to come on stream. That's available to us now. So
it's not. You've got to build it.
Stuart, yeah, you've had a point. So we need to be moving forward, and we need to be moving forward rapidly. All of the leading experts in the field are saying that what we do in these next 8 years before 2030 is absolutely crucial, because the carbon that's growing and growing, if we can reduce it early, the earlier we can reduce it, the less final amount of carbon dioxide there'll be in the atmosphere. And that's crucial for generations ahead. So it makes absolute sense for the Isle of Man not to be investing in fossil fuels, which in the long term, they're not just environmentally damaging.
But we're not investing in them, are we? We're just granting a license to explore.
I'm thinking of the Isle of Man, not just government. I'm thinking, for the Isle of Man, including companies here, to be investing in that. It's not just environmentally massively damaging. I fully expect it to be economically damaging. The International Energy Agency said last year there must be no more exploration for fossil fuels. That's exactly where Kroger are moving. We've had it said by numerous international bodies, United Nations, Antonio Guterres, the head of the UN, by Mark Carney and others, that we've already got more fossil fuels than we can possibly use. Mark Carney has said half our known gas reserves
but
can never be burnt.
Hasn't the conflict between Russia and Ukraine kind of driven the coach and horses through some of these arguments, because those readily available fossil fuels are coming out of Russian oil and gas wells, and it is fair to say that most people in the developed world don't really want to be using that.
I think that's true. There is a wish not to be using fossil fuels. I think what's happening in the Ukraine, it's absolute tragedy, really, what's been going on. But it has done enormous. It's created enormous uncertainty in gas prices. They were running at sort of 45 pence per therm, and then they rose to £5 a therm. They're down to £2 odd a therm at the moment. The profit that might be there to be made out of whatever gas that may or may not exist is there, but hopefully this is not going to last forever, and we will see the point come, and it may come quite quickly and quite sharply when it comes, when gas prices normalise again, but then reduce further, because there's only 20 years life of gas life left for countries that are trying to get down to zero emissions by 2050, which is the world's population.
Just in relation to addressing things urgently, we've got three issues that have been raised, and politicians have been talking about the urgent need to address. One is climate change. One is the current cost of living crisis, primarily driven by fuel. And the other emergency apparently is housing. How urgent would you say urgent is if after 10% of the time of this government, we're 10% into this government in terms of its available time, all we've done really is say how urgent these things are, Stu. Are we serious when we're talking about urgent, or is this just warm words and platitudes?
Well, yes, I think it probably is warm words and platitudes. And one of the sadnesses that has come across me since being elected is the fact that, and I made a video last week that's on YouTube where I talk about this, that government seems to, and a lot of businesses nowadays, measure their success by outputs rather than outcomes. So as long as everybody's busy, oh yes, we're all working very hard, oh good, that's all right then, let's have another report, let's have another unmet needs survey, let's have another public consultation, but nothing actually gets done. And to Paul's point, make no mistake, I've got no problem with clean energy. But at the moment, it's, and I'm a very simple person, I'm not a scientist and I'm not an economist, but we've got a firm in Ballasalla, a Manx firm, that is talking about spending their money, or money that they raise, to get gas out of the ground in Manx waters, and I don't see any other firms saying, we'll build a wind farm, or we'll build a tidal farm.
Paul?
The number of people I've met with in some 6 months I've been in Legislative Council who are saying that they want to build wind farms in the Isle of Man. Some of them saying they want to go further than that and build storage on the Isle of Man. And where there's difficulties with that at the moment, or in the way that it would work with the network we've got and the need to have a strong network to be able to deal with some of this. So the pressure is absolutely there. The economic interest is there. And it's much faster in economic interest and more certain economic interest than the possibility of gas in the Irish Sea.
As ever with these things, we could talk forever. I've really enjoyed that discussion. I do hope that we continue to have these discussions, and urgent discussions, and urgent action is required. And let's hope that 20% of the way into the term of this government, we actually see something being done. Is the government decision to extend Crogers' licence merely a convenient way of allowing the matter to disappear into the long grass for several more years? How can government possibly agree to gas extraction when it wishes to urgently address the climate emergency? And closing in on a fifth of the way through the available Tynwald sittings, is anything urgent for Isle of Man government? Please get in touch with Phil Gaughan at manxradio.com and let me know your thoughts and views on the programme. You can access the podcast of this week's agenda from Manx Radio's website. But for now, I'm Phil Gaughan. Goramayo, thanks for listening.